Like most books from Nicholas Sparks, his latest, The Best of Me, shot to the top of the bestseller list from the moment it was released. And like most of his other books, it's set right here in North Carolina. What explains Nicholas Sparks' extraordinary success and what explains his tenacious loyalty to his adopted home state by writing about us in every book? Well, we'll ask Nicholas Sparks those questions when he's our guest on North Carolina Bookwatch next.
Funding for North Carolina Bookwatch is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV, and by the North Carolina Humanities Council.
Welcome to North Carolina Bookwatch. My guest is Nicholas Sparks. He's the author of The Best of Me and 10 or 15 or 20 other wonderful best-selling books.
Yeah, something like that. Hey, well, thanks.
Hey, no, we're so glad to have you. Although you grew up in, well, you lived all over, grew up in California mostly.
Right.
Got an athletic scholarship to Notre Dame.
To Notre Dame, where I still hold the school record there, but we don't have to talk about that.
We won't talk about it.
Even though it's been 25 years.
No, but I mean, no, you're getting me off track. No, I didn't mean that way, but your interest in athletics and your recollection of how important it was for you has led you to do all kinds of extraordinary things down in New Bern, which just touch your heart in terms of making the better athletic facilities for and coaching for the kids down there. But we won't talk about that.
Absolutely.
Or your extraordinary achievements as a trackman before you got hurt.
Sure, thanks.
You've been in North Carolina now almost 20 years.
Yeah, almost 20 years. Moved here in 1992.
And your writing career sort of coincided with your coming to the Carolinas.
No question, no question.
And so, but nevertheless, a guy grows up in California. And some of our North Carolina authors, as soon as they get famous, they go to Virginia or they go to move someplace. But what is it about North Carolina that keeps you here and keeps you focused on our state?
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that I like North Carolina. I really enjoy living here. You know, there are big city people and there are small town people. I'm a small town person. And there are mountain people and ocean people. I'm more of a coastal person. And it's just geographically a beautiful place. The weather is great here. The people are fabulous. And my wife and I, we found it was just a great place to raise the kind of kids that we were proud to raise. I mean, my son is now 20 years old, and the nicest young man, you know, just, he would do North Carolina proud. Of course, he's a Tar Heel.
Well, this is another great story. Is your fan, Charlotte? You got 5. You all have 5?
We do have. We have 5 kids, and
are you done?
Well, sadly, the wife got selfish. You know, I wanted like 7. You know, if I could have had 11, maybe we could have got a reality show or something. But no, yeah, we had 5, and it's fine. They range in age from 20 to 10, and we found that North Carolina is just it is a great state in so many ways, And I don't mean that. You have to understand that I travel around the country all the time. I've been to virtually every state, and all states have their wonderful elements, their towns that are great, their people that are great, their cultures in this. But North Carolina has always felt like home to me. And here's an interesting story that you can actually trace my family's roots back to this country. Our port of entry was Wilmington in 1709. And I think we appear in the first census, the Sparks, in Brunswick County in 1720.
That's amazing because, I mean, and you've got forebears from lots of European countries. But were these Scots or were these?
That,
you don't know?
My brother has all that information. It was actually traced by my grandfather's brother, who got really interested. He was actually a big CEO at a big company, and he spent a fortune in tracing at least my father's lineage through this country. And look, we were in North Carolina in 17 even long before it was a state.
Welcome home.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, that's terrific. You live in one of North Carolina's smaller cities, I guess.
It's a town. It's
a
30,000
town.
people.
But notwithstanding, you say I like small towns. Well, you really do, because, for instance, in The Best of Me, you go to a really small town.
Yeah, Oriental.
Tell us about Oriental and why you picked it for this story.
Whenever I write a novel, once I have a story kind of that comes to mind, you want to pick the right location for it, because the location will vary. In Message in a Bottle, I needed a certain mid-sized city near the coast, and Wilmington was perfect for that. In this particular novel, I didn't want a town that was so small, but I didn't want one where everyone literally didn't know each other. And Oriental really fit the bill. It's a very beautiful town. It's got a great history. It's got a lot of culture, and yet it is set amidst a very large county, Pamlico County, which is very much rural. And I kind of wanted the best of both worlds, a very rural area, but an area that also has little tiny pockets of wealth, because that was playing into the type of story that I wanted to write. So Oriental ended up being perfect for it. With that said, people who read this story may recognize some of the places in Oriental, but they may not recognize some of the other elements that I put into the novel. The Cole family, for instance, which was a figment of my imagination.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the story. And the story, it will not be unfamiliar. The plot lines will not be unfamiliar. People
Sure.
read The Notebook, and you've got the Cole family of the poor.
Right.
If there were a railroad,
Wrong side of the track.
Wrong side of the track. If there were a railroad in
Right.
Oriental, and then you've got
The Colliers.
The Colliers, an aristocratic family. And
Absolutely.
And then you got somebody from each of these families. Tell us a little bit of it.
Sure. You know, this is a story of Amanda and Dawson, and Dawson came from a family from the wrong side of the tracks, but he wasn't like his family, so to speak. Always didn't want to follow the route that they did. Anyway, he falls in love with Amanda, and they are madly in love in high school, much like The Notebook. And then their lives diverge as she heads off to college. And this is the story of really, though, what happens 24 years later when they go back to Oriental and they're in town for the funeral of an old friend, a mentor, so to speak. And really, they're the only two people at this funeral. And they realize that even though 24 years have passed and so many things have changed in their lives, certain things haven't changed at all, including the feelings they have for each other. You know, it's this look back at first love. It's this look back at the choices we make and the consequences of those choices. It's a novel about the what ifs of life. What if I had done something different, or taken a different career path, or moved someplace new, or had kids or didn't have kids? Or what would have happened had I followed my heart and married someone else? This is a novel that explores all of these things, and of course I tried to do it in a way that kept the pages turning and added all these other elements so that people say, wow, what's going to happen next? I did my best to do those things.
Well, I think you did a really good job. I would have to say that. There's an extra sort of complication, and I don't want to say it's brand new in terms of your writing, but it's spicy. And that is, usually these two lovers who come back together, they have a certain amount of freedom to move if they need to. In this case, Amanda is married and settled, and with
3 children.
With children who need the attention and whom she loves.
Right.
And so she's.
Yes.
What is the conflict?
Yes. Well, that is the nature of the story. Whenever you're going to do a love story, you just can't write a story where they meet and they're immediately in love. That doesn't work. You need a conflict, something that keeps the characters apart. And throughout all of my novels, every single one, they've had different conflicts and different levels.
A different barrier that keeps this explosive
It keeps the
romance.
story going. You know, Romeo and Juliet had a conflict, right? There's conflicts. In Gone with the Wind, there was a conflict. You know, so what I try to do as an author is to not use the same conflict over and over and over. And the easiest conflict in a literary term can be described as what is keeping the characters from coming together in the novels that I write. What's keeping them from just being together? Well, you know, in The Notebook, first Allie was engaged, and then that's why they can't be together, because there's someone else. Then later, they can't be together because, well, she has Alzheimer's and she no longer remembers him. In this particular case, they can't be together because Amanda is married. She's got children. She doesn't want to break up the family. And yet, she's not happy in her marriage at all. And so that adds a further level of, that's not conflict, but that adds complication, which is, again, something you do as a writer.
Well, and
you know, you got all these tricks.
Well, I don't know how you do this. I mean, maybe you don't want to tell us how you do it, but you describe this heated passion developing, but we never get much description of sex.
No.
What are your rules or your philosophy about that?
On that, you know, it's interesting. It really depends on the novel. You know, that's partly it. You know, if I'm writing about teens or something like that, you know, I generally wouldn't write about, let's say, premarital sex or anything like that. When I'm writing about adults, even though, you know, we know in the Christian world this is not a good thing to do. In the Christian world, this also happens quite frequently. It is what it is. The world is the world, you know. God gave us these urges, you know. What can we do about them? It's all about the passion. You really, what I'm trying to do is, by the time a reader one of the characters in the novel finally admits an emotion, you already know. You know, you already know what you're feeling because you as the reader feel it. So you try to generate authentic emotional impact first and then something. So that by the time, for instance, two characters say, "I love you," as a reader, you're like, well, yeah, I knew that 8 pages ago. Took you long enough to finally admit it. Hello. That's really what you want the reader to be feeling. You want the same thing, though, with anger and frustration and all of these things. And so if you're really trying to work in that context, that you're really trying to generate emotion, emotion comes from our feelings and our thoughts and the little actions of lives much more so than from the big action. So you really have a big buildup, and then you just simply say, all right, readers, use your imagination. Use your imagination. You know, most likely you've been there, so use your imagination.
Well, part of the thrill, I think, for older readers, my age, is that long past the time where these passions have had total control over you, they've quieted down, and you seem to be trying to persuade us. Oh no, it's still there.
It's still there. It's still there.
Just as in my story, maybe it could happen to you. And is that what is keeping us turn those pages?
I think so. You know, because passion is not just based on one thing. It's based on so many things. It's based on this chemistry that you feel. It's based on an intuition that you feel about each other, about your level of communication, about your level of trust, and your level of your ability to allow yourself to imagine more time spent with this person. So none of those things die until we're in the coffin. It's really easy to overlook these things. You know, if you've been in a single relationship for a long time, you've been married for a long time. You know, I've been married for 22 years. It's great. And you might say, you know, we don't feel this burning passion for each other, and that's impossible. And yet there have been so many things, wonderful things that have taken its place. There's this comfort, this familiarity, this trust, this understanding that you don't have right away. So which one's better? And I'll tell you what, hey, you don't have it? Well, take separate vacations for 6 months and come see each other. Well, you'll have it back again, right? I'm not saying, you know, but you can, you know, if you want to move away from comfort and familiarity, well, you know, maybe, I don't know, it can come back.
You've got all these factors operating, and you've got a sense of knowledge about how we function as human beings and what moves us. But that doesn't write the book for you.
No.
And so tell us a little bit about how a story like The Best of Me, your latest book, developed. Or can you tell us the story just about this one?
Yeah, I tell people this because I have no problem telling people. It's funny. I've often told my editor and my agent similar things, and I say, should I tell people? It's like a secret. And they're like, you can tell them all you want. They still got to do it, all right? So I'll tell you how I start. I start with the ages of the characters. That's first and foremost.
So you write that down? I mean, you start...
In my head, I pick the age of the characters, and that's usually based on
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is incredible. So the start...
The very first idea.
You would get out a piece of paper and say, I want this person to be So you don't roll the dice. You say, I'm interested in a person of this age at this point in time. I've got to kind of, I might be able to make a character out of this person.
I start with the age. I start with the age because I look at what I've written in the past. You know, if I've written a couple of young person books like I did recently, well, I'll write a book about someone in their 40s. And now that I have someone in their 40s, but I know there's a lot of teens, well, then I might do this. But I have this movie coming in Safe Haven, and those are movies for people in their 20s and 30s. So who haven't I written about? Well, maybe someone in their 50s or whatever. So I pick something that I haven't done so it'll feel fresh again. So start with the age. The age is going to inform the dilemmas of these characters. If you
so do you pick the ages of two people, one man, one woman?
Yeah, both first. Yep. I'm writing about characters in their teens, their 20s, their 30s.
But it's usually a man and a woman. And how?
Yeah, you pick the age first. Then the age is going to inform you a little bit of their dilemmas. If they're young, you're obviously dealing with first love or second love.
I keep interrupting you, but now are you writing down your notes, or are you just sitting back on the hammock thinking about all of this?
Yeah, I'm just sitting there thinking. You know, I'm doing it in the car, wherever.
Over a period of a few weeks.
Yeah, weeks, months, right? So then you pick the age. Then you have the dilemmas. You know, the age. Like I said, the age is going to inform you a little bit about who they are. They give you some general guidelines. So then you'll say, oh, I'm writing about characters in their 40s in this novel. What are people in their 40s? They might have been married for 20 years. That could be one of my characters. And then you just start asking yourself what if questions. What if they had children? What if the marriage is not as happy as it could be? All right, this guy could build something. You know, then you have the other character. Well, what if he's never gotten over her? What if he's never dated again? Boom. Now I know a little bit about the characters.
Would you start writing at this point? You're just thinking, all this is just in your mind.
Yeah, just thinking. Right. And so you set those to aside. And you're like, what's the conflict that keeps them apart? This one was particularly easy because it was marriage. But not all of them are that easy. You know, what kept Will and Ronnie apart in the last song? You know, well, she was only down for a summer. She didn't want to get involved with anyone. And then he was not like the kind of guy she could ever imagine herself falling for. Those are not quite as concrete as marriage. Yeah. Right. So whenever you get, but you still have to work with with the pie you've been given. So anyway, so you say, what's the conflict? Then you have what's driving the story. Despite this conflict that's keeping my characters from being together, what's pushing them back together? Well, there's a funeral going on. They've got to do this funeral. Tuck wanted them to be together. They've got to arrange this, these scatter ashes, things to do. Nonetheless, they have to be together. Then you have to know how the story ends. You have to know how the story ends, because for me, it's either happy, sad, or bittersweet. There's only three, one of the three. So you might look and say, how many happies have I done lately, or sad or bittersweet? Because the reason is, as I try to move the reader through all of the emotions of life, and if I know I'm going to make them cry at the very end, well, then I don't need to make them cry anywhere else in the novel. However, if they're going to be happy at the end, there's got to be something sad somewhere in that novel. In the last song, the characters get together in the end. Okay, that's a happy ending. So, sorry, Dad, you had to die. It's as simple as that, all right? So then, so you go over thousands of ideas, different permutations, going through my head. Yeah, what's the story driver? Sure. Right, nothing written down. And finally, some combination of ideas strikes me as right. Then you pick your structure, and then you pick your structure in your head.
In your head still. Structure means what?
Well, it could be a two-part story like The Notebook, where I write it, most of the story, and then here's part two of the story, and there's a little bit of gap. It could be a very linear story. It could be, and structure goes to the length of time that the story is going over.
What is the structure of The Best of Me?
This is linear.
Straight through,
but it wasn't originally. But we can get to that after this. So you pick your structure, then you pick your voice. You can do third person, you can do first person, or you could do limited third omniscient. And each have their strengths and weaknesses. First person draws you right in, and you know this character. This is Noah in the final third of the novel. This is Landon Carter. This is John in Dear John. These are some of the more popular characters I've ever created because you feel like you know them. It's great. You say, do it every time. But the other characters' reactions are only viewed through that person's eyes. You never know what they're really thinking. So that's why you do third person.
So what did you pick for?
This is third person. But the last one, Safe Haven, was limited third person omniscient, and Dear John was first. It depends on the story you're writing. So then you have all of
structure, you got voice, and you got your general idea of how everything begins and ends.
And then you have the 6 rules you have to follow.
What are those?
Those are very easy. You know, you want the, you want, let's see, it should be relatively efficiently written. You don't want to go off on a 900-page novel for a 200-page story, or for instance. Writing has to be emotive. It's got to evoke genuine emotion. Characters have to be universal. You've got to have roots to a Greek tragedy. You've got to appeal to a woman's fantasy, and loyalty's got to win in the end.
Wow.
There you go.
Great. Well,
that's how you write a Nicholas Sparks novel.
We got a graduate course in writing right here, and we thank you for that. One of the things that really interested me, you talked about the religious, the religious values that interfere sometimes with a good story, and here's I'll stutter a little bit because this is a tough question for me to ask, but you're deeply, you're deeply religious. And
well, I'm religious.
Yeah, you are. I mean, and
I go to church.
It shows. But in this book, no church.
No church.
No religion.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on here? You're writing. Something that's such an important part of your life does not
make it in there.
And is this just commercial that we got so many different beliefs that it gets in the way of a universal story? What's the
It didn't fit into this story. You know, it fit very strongly into A Walk to Remember. It fit really strongly into. The wedding, he mentioned that he was kind of a weekend religious guy. Religion goes into, let's say, Logan's wondering about the world and why everything happened the way it did. In the end, all I'm trying to do is tell you a story that you're going to enjoy. I am not here to preach. I am not here to tell you any political philosophies or my views on the world. I'm not writing an opinion novel. They have no purpose other than to keep the reader entertained and for the reader to have enjoyed it and to remember that story for a long time. Ideally, after you've read The Best of Me, ideally 5 years from now, you can walk by this novel and say, I remember that story.
Which is
I don't remember every
extraordinary.
detail.
Yep.
But I remember that story because there's a lot of writers, you look at their body work and the stories run together. They're all the same. But for me, I really want to write novels that are memorable.
Well, let me talk about spiritual things again. And one of the most important characters in this book is a ghost.
Yeah.
And
what do you think about that?
Well, it just said, it's got to be controversial because you say, this is so real, so set in reality, and you start talking about, do you believe in ghosts?
Of course.
Do you really?
I have a ghost story. I experienced a ghost. It was really wild. I will tell you my story. It's very short, but I will tell you. I have a very good friend. He lives in Sacramento, California. I stay with him whenever I visit. My family does. They're close family friends of ours. He's like my parents almost because my parents are deceased. Anyway, his name is Billy Mills. He won the Olympic gold medal in 1964, 10,000 meter run. Wrote a book with him. They made the movie Running Brave about him. Anyway, I dated his daughter years ago. That's why I still know them. And we still actually stay in his house. I'm the ex-boyfriend that never went away. That's what my ex-girlfriend calls me. But all that aside, he's an American Indian. And somebody gave him an eagle bone whistle that had been owned by Black Elk, who is a very mystical Sioux Indian. You can read Black Elk Speaks, for instance, very famous book. Anyway, he puts it in his little library with the headdress. He's been given numerous things over the years. All of a sudden, I go to his house, and I know nothing about this, and I see all this movement from the corner of my eye. Every time I look, there's nothing there. My wife wakes up. She says, who is playing the drums, beating on the tom-tom in the middle of the night? Nobody's there. Weird things. Now, they said, oh, you mean George. Lights, doors closing. Well, finally, he said, this is not right. So he delivered this eagle bone whistle back to Black Elk's family. And when he returned to the house, he felt a rush through him that just said, thank you. And ever since then, there's been nothing there.
Wow. So you really believe in ghosts?
Sure. I believe, I believe that happened to me. There was movement. I saw it. I don't imagine that stuff. There was nothing going on. And how would we have known?
And so
and
that's
what
it gives
Dawson
you license
experienced.
to write about ghosts as real rather than sort of as ways to end up the book in a
I never make it clear. That's the thing about what I write. You know, you never know whether it's real or whether it's in your head, just like with me.
Well, the 1,000 things to talk about, we're running out of time, and one of them is that just stunned me, and that is that this book, The Best of Me, is a brand new book, and there's already a movie deal.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, the movie deal. Yeah, I sold it to Warner Brothers actually before.
Sight unseen.
Sight unseen. I went in and pitched them a story.
Now the other part of it is that you're going to be involved.
Yeah.
And is this more fun than writing? Is it?
Well, they both have their pros and cons. Certainly writing will still take up the vast majority of my time. I am a producer then, and with that I work primarily heavily with the script and the casting, but I don't do budgets and on-set management.
And we're out of time. Heck, I'm just getting started. But last question, can we have the opening here in North Carolina? Are you strong enough?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I can do whatever I want.
Can you? Okay.
Yeah. Hey, look, you know what? We had a special sneak premiere of Dear John here in North Carolina with all the stars at Fort Bragg. It was an Army story.
Well,
so.
golly,
Look,
so
I
many
love
things.
the military.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And we're so proud of what you've done with North Carolina and for North Carolina, and I hope you'll come back again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot. Thanks to Nicholas Sparks for a great book, The Best of Me, and for a stimulating conversation about writing and about this book. Thanks to all y'all for listening. It's been Who's Talking, or it's been not Who's Talking, but it's been North Carolina Bookwatch. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you'll come back same time next week.
Funding for North Carolina Bookwatch is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV, and by the North Carolina Humanities Council.